Welcome to Bite-Sized L&D, your quick, no-nonsense update on the latest in workplace learning. Today, we're uncovering how HR can combat middle manager burnout with proactive strategies and exploring key insights into building resilient leadership cultures. All right, let's get straight into it.
Today, we're going to explore a critical issue affecting organizations worldwide: middle manager burnout. Our companies rely on these crucial team leaders, yet they're experiencing unprecedented levels of stress and fatigue. I'm Donna, your host, and joining me today is Yakov Lasker, an expert in organizational psychology and leadership development. Yakov has been researching the growing crisis of middle manager burnout and developing strategies HR departments can implement to address this challenge proactively. Welcome to Bite-Sized L&D, Yakov.
Thanks so much for having me, Donna. I really appreciate that introduction to this important topic. Middle manager burnout is indeed reaching crisis levels in many organizations, and I'm eager to discuss how HR and L&D professionals can lead the charge in supporting this critical group. I'd love to dive right in with your first question.
Let's start with the scope of the problem. Just how prevalent is middle manager burnout today? And what statistics are you seeing that highlight the urgency of addressing this issue?
The numbers are frankly alarming, Donna. According to recent data, 79% of middle managers report being at risk of burnout just from the stress of people management alone. Even more concerning, 43% say they're actively experiencing burnout right now. That's higher than any other worker group in most organizations. The situation has serious retention implications too. About 46% of middle managers globally have indicated they're likely to quit within a year due to work stress. And here's a particularly telling statistic. 57% of managers wish someone had warned them not to take their current management position. That speaks volumes about the gap between what people expect in these roles versus the reality they experience.
Those numbers are indeed troubling. What specific factors are creating this perfect storm for middle managers? Why are they particularly vulnerable to burnout compared to other organizational levels?
Middle managers today are caught in what I call a structural vice grip. They're translating executive demands to frontline execution, while simultaneously managing increasingly complex team dynamics, especially with hybrid work. They're often enforcing policies they didn't create and may personally disagree with, like return-to-office mandates, while absorbing pushback from their teams. Another critical factor is that many are accidental managers, high performers who were promoted for their technical skills without formal leadership training. They're essentially learning to swim in the deep end, while also trying to keep others afloat. Add to this the pressures of understaffed teams, constant context switching between executive and team needs, and limited decision-making authority, despite high accountability, and you have a recipe for burnout. The cascading effects are significant. Manager burnout can cause a 32% drop in productivity and 60% worse ability to focus, which then impacts the entire team's performance.
You've mentioned HR can play a pivotal role in addressing this. What are the main strategies HR departments should be focusing on to tackle middle manager burnout proactively?
HR departments need to approach this challenge with a three-pronged strategy: prediction, upskilling, and culture building. First, prediction means using people analytics and data as an early warning system to identify managers at risk before they reach crisis point. Second, upskilling involves providing targeted training in resilience, stress management, and leadership skills to help managers cope with pressure effectively. The third element is culture building, creating an organizational environment where well-being is valued, healthy boundaries are respected, and middle managers feel supported rather than squeezed. These three areas work synergistically. The data helps target interventions, the training builds personal capacity, and the culture sustains these practices. HR is uniquely positioned to lead in all three areas, working as a strategic partner with senior leadership to protect this vital layer of organizational talent.
Let's dig deeper into that first strategy, using data as an early warning system. What specific metrics should HR be monitoring to identify potential burnout before it becomes critical?
HR should monitor several key indicators that often precede burnout. Absenteeism patterns are revealing, either a spike in unplanned sick days, or conversely, managers not taking any vacation can signal trouble. Excessive overtime and always-on work behaviors, like frequent after-hours emails or weekend work, are major red flags that someone is overburdened or struggling with boundaries. Other important metrics include declining performance or sudden changes in productivity, either drops or unsustainable spikes, engagement scores and team sentiment data from pulse surveys. High turnover within a specific manager's team often indicates underlying issues, and cancellation patterns for one-on-one meetings can show a manager is underwater. Companies like Microsoft are using tools like Viva Insights to track these warning signs and create what some call a burnout radar, allowing HR to intervene with targeted support before a manager reaches breaking point.
That's fascinating. Can you share an example of how this data-driven approach works in practice? How are companies actually implementing these burnout detection systems?
Absolutely, global companies like Unilever have developed what are essentially burnout dashboards that correlate data from multiple sources, engagement surveys, absence records, and workload reports to identify high-risk managers and teams. This gives HR visibility into who might need support before they vocalize it themselves. Microsoft offers another excellent example with their Viva Insights platform, which alerts leaders when teams show concerning work patterns. Too many after-hours collaborations, insufficient focus time, or meeting overload. The system can then prompt interventions like workload adjustments or boundary-setting conversations. The key is treating burnout as a measurable, predictable phenomenon rather than waiting for a crisis. When the dashboard shows a manager consistently logging 14-hour days or their team's ENPS scores dropping significantly, HR can step in with coaching, resources reallocation, or even mandatory time off, essentially catching the fire while it's still just smoke.
Moving to your second strategy, upskilling. What specific training and development should HR provide to help middle managers build resilience and manage stress more effectively?
Resilience training is foundational, teaching managers techniques to bounce back from challenges and regulate their stress response. This includes practical skills like mindfulness practices, stress recognition, and adaptive problem-solving strategies. The U.S. Army's Master Resilience Training Program demonstrates how impactful this can be. 92% of participants reported improved resilience, with 97% applying these skills in their jobs. Equally important is emotional intelligence development, training managers to understand their own emotional patterns and empathize with others. Companies like Meta focus specifically on this, providing regular EQ training that helps managers support team psychological well-being, while also managing their own emotional responses to pressure. Mental health literacy is also crucial, educating managers about burnout signs, available resources, and how to have supportive conversations about well-being. When combined with core leadership skills, training in areas like delegation and time management, these capabilities help managers feel more competent and less overwhelmed, breaking the cycle that leads to burnout.
Beyond formal training, what role does coaching and peer support play in preventing manager burnout? How can HR facilitate these more personalized approaches?
One-on-one coaching provides individualized support that formal training can't match. Professional coaches help managers navigate their specific stressors, set healthy boundaries, and develop personalized resilience strategies. This tailored approach can be transformative for managers feeling isolated in their challenges. Peer support networks are equally powerful. HR can organize facilitated roundtables or create dedicated channels where middle managers share challenges and solutions in a psychologically safe environment. Simply knowing "I'm not the only one struggling with this" can reduce the shame and isolation that often accompany burnout. Some organizations create manager mindfulness circles or curate micro-learning resources specifically for manager well-being. The key insight here is that while formal training builds skills, coaching and peer support provide the emotional scaffolding managers need to apply those skills under pressure.
Let's talk about the third pillar, culture. What specific work life balance policies and flexibility measures are most effective in preventing middle manager burnout?
The most effective policies give managers more control over when, where, and how they work. Companies like Google and Microsoft have embraced flexible scheduling and hybrid work models, trusting managers to arrange their schedules in ways that accommodate both work demands and personal well-being. These options reduce commute stress and create breathing room for recovery. Time-off initiatives are equally critical. LinkedIn implemented company-wide Rest Up weeks where everyone takes a break simultaneously, ensuring managers can actually disconnect without worrying about work piling up. Others, like Salesforce, provide dedicated well-being days beyond regular vacation time. What makes these policies effective isn't just their existence, but their active endorsement from leadership. When executives openly take time off and avoid sending late-night emails, they signal that rest is not just permitted, but valued. The underlying principle is giving managers both the permission and practical opportunity to recharge regularly, rather than burning until breakdown.
Communication norms and psychological safety seem to be important cultural elements. How can organizations establish healthier communication boundaries to protect managers from the always on expectation?
Establishing clear communication guidelines is crucial. HR can work with leadership to set expectations around after-hours messaging. For instance, agreeing that non-urgent emails shouldn't be sent on weekends or late evenings, using delay send features for messages drafted outside working hours. Technology can support this. Microsoft Teams has introduced quiet time settings that mute notifications during designated personal time. Perhaps more important is psychological safety, ensuring managers feel safe admitting when they're overwhelmed. Data shows 58% of middle managers don't believe their concerns will be heard by executives. Companies like Cisco are actively changing this by explicitly encouraging managers to voice challenges without fear of appearing weak. Regular forums for middle managers to provide candid feedback to senior leadership, combined with visible action on that feedback, builds trust that speaking up leads to support rather than stigma. These norms give managers permission to maintain boundaries and seek help before reaching burnout stage.
Recognition seems to be another key cultural component. How does properly acknowledging middle managers' contributions help prevent burnout? And what approaches work best?
Middle managers often operate in an invisible zone where they receive less recognition than either executives or frontline employees. Yet recognition is a powerful burnout antidote. It validates that their efforts matter and counters the feeling of thankless struggle. Simple, specific acknowledgement of their contributions in public forums like town halls or team meetings can significantly boost morale. Effective recognition goes beyond occasional praise to include both formal and informal approaches. Some organizations have created specific awards for managers who demonstrate exceptional people leadership or well-being promotion. Others involve middle managers in higher-level decision-making as a form of recognition. While monetary rewards are appreciated, surveys show managers deeply value feeling supported and appreciated day to day. In fact, lack of support is a top reason nearly half plan to leave their roles. By celebrating not just results, but how managers achieve them, especially when they model healthy work-life balance, organizations reinforce that well-being is valued alongside performance.
Can you share some examples of companies that have successfully built supportive cultures for their middle managers? What specific approaches have they implemented?
Salesforce stands out with its comprehensive approach. They offer wellness programs and mental health resources, But importantly, their executives openly discuss personal mental health challenges, signaling that prioritizing well-being is culturally acceptable. Netflix demonstrates the power of autonomy in preventing burnout. Their famous no rules rules culture allows managers to take vacation whenever needed and challenge unnecessary workloads. Cisco has built exceptional psychological safety where managers report feeling comfortable, admitting when they're overwhelmed, because leaders consistently respond with help rather than judgment. LinkedIn and HubSpot have implemented company-wide breaks, like week of rest periods, and no email on weekends, guidelines that have become talent attractors. What these examples share is authentic commitment from the top. Executives who don't just approve well-being policies, but actively model and champion them, creating environments where middle managers don't have to choose between their health and high performance.
With all these strategies, data, training, and culture, what kind of results are organizations seeing when they invest in preventing middle manager burnout?
Organizations implementing these approaches are seeing significant positive outcomes. Reduced turnover is an immediate benefit. Companies that support middle managers effectively report higher retention rates in this critical talent pool. Team engagement scores typically improve as well, since manager well-being directly influences team climate and performance. There's also compelling business performance data. McKinsey research from 2023 found that organizations with a high proportion of supported, high-performing middle managers achieve measurably better financial outcomes. The ROI isn't just happier managers, though that matters. It's stronger organizational resilience, better execution of strategic initiatives, and improved talent development throughout the organization. In an environment where 80% of employees globally feel at risk of burnout, companies that successfully support their middle layer gain a meaningful, competitive advantage.
Let's talk about implementation challenges. What are the common obstacles organizations face when trying to address middle manager burnout, and how can they overcome them?
The biggest challenge is often executive buy-in, convincing senior leaders that investing in manager well-being drives business results, not just feel-good metrics. HR needs to frame burnout prevention in business terms, highlighting the costs of turnover, disengagement, and lost productivity when managers burn out, versus the returns on investment in support systems. Resource constraints present another challenge, especially for smaller organizations. The solution is starting with high-impact, low-cost initiatives like establishing communication norms or peer support networks while building toward more resource-intensive programs. Cultural resistance can also be an obstacle, particularly in industries with hustle culture traditions. Overcoming this requires visible modeling from respected leaders and celebrating early adopters who demonstrate that sustainable performance outperforms burnout heroics in the long run. Success typically comes through persistent, incremental change rather than dramatic overhauls.
As we wrap up, what key message would you like to leave with HR and L&D professionals listening to our conversation? What's the most important step they can take right now to address middle manager burnout?
The most important message is that middle manager burnout is preventable, not inevitable. But prevention requires proactive, strategic action. The first step I'd recommend is assessment. Use the data you already have to understand the current state of your middle managers. Look at engagement scores, turnover patterns, and absenteeism to identify potential hotspots. Then have candid conversations with managers about their experiences. From there, focus on implementing a balanced approach that combines early detection through data, skill building through targeted training, and cultural support through policies and norms that enable well-being. Remember that when middle managers thrive, their teams thrive, and ultimately, the whole organization wins. Don't wait for a crisis. The organizations seeing the best results are those treating middle manager support as a strategic priority rather than a reactive response to problems. Your middle managers are your organizational backbone. Investing in their well-being is one of the highest leverage moves you can make.
Yakov, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Thank you for sharing your expertise on such an important topic. For our listeners who want to learn more about preventing middle manager burnout, where would you suggest they start?
Thank you, Donna. For listeners looking to take action, I'd recommend starting with your own organization's data, particularly engagement surveys and exit interviews, to identify patterns specific to your middle managers. Industry reports from UKG, McKinsey, and Predictive Index offer excellent research on the current state of manager burnout and effective interventions. For practical implementation guides, resources from platforms like CIPHR and WellRight provide actionable frameworks for burnout prevention. And finally, look to companies like LinkedIn, Salesforce, and Cisco that have publicly shared their approaches to manager well-being. There's no need to reinvent the wheel when there are excellent models to adapt. The key is to start somewhere, measure the impact, and continuously refine your approach based on what resonates with your specific manager population.
That concludes today's episode of Bite-Sized L&D. I want to thank our guest, Yakov Lasker, for this enlightening discussion on preventing middle manager burnout. Until next time, this is Donna signing off.
Thank you, Donna. Great week, everybody. And that's the end of today's podcast. Remember, preventing middle manager burnout is achievable by utilizing data to predict burnout, enhancing manager skills, and cultivating supportive work cultures. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues so they can also stay updated on the latest news and gain powerful insights. Stay tuned for more updates.